Telemedicine is developing pretty rapidly. That's not a new statement. And my guest today specializes in helping functional medicine practices who want to build out a telemedicine practice in part or in whole. He was a guest about a year ago, and he's coming back to tell us what's new in telemedicine now. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of PracticeCare. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that usually what they want, but care is better when the provider owns the practice because that's when they're going to have the most freedom to make the clinical decisions they think is best for their patient. It's just not quite the same when somebody else owns the practice. Usually, sometimes, eventually, their agenda starts to creep in. Let's just keep it simple and keep it private practice. My guest today is Scott Rattigan. Scott is an attorney, a nationally recognized speaker, podcast host, and best-selling author of The Practice of Telemedicine. He's the founder of Functional Lawyer and co-founder of Origins Incubator. Scott was inspired to help the functional medicine community after helping his wife build her functional medicine practice and watching her colleagues searching but not finding solid legal and business foundations to reduce unnecessary risks. Through Functional Lawyer and Origins Incubator, he helps practitioners to protect their license and grow their practice with confidence. Scott, welcome back to PracticeCare.
Hey, thanks, Carl. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it was about a year ago or so, maybe a little bit longer since you were on the first time. And we talked since, and you said, a lot's going on. There's bills. It's pretty active going on and what's developing with telemedicine. So I want to get into that. But for those who didn't hear our previous episode, I want to start with where I start with everyone. Just tell us a bit more about yourself. That bio is brief. That's what I asked for. So fill in some gaps.
Yeah, thanks. It was brief, but it covered all the highlights. So my wife's
You're a good bio writer.
Yeah. My wife's a doctor, and that's how I got into this mess in the first place, where she started her practice in functional medicine way back in 2016, when people didn't know what functional medicine was, and still maybe don't. Most people don't, but now more people seek it out. So back then we needed legal help, and I was not in healthcare at the time. Went to the healthcare partner at my firm, spent some money, didn't get a lot of value. He wasn't the right fit for us. And I learned later that that's very common. It's hard to find somebody that knew, single solo practice or private practice, medical legal issues. And someone that does is often too expensive for somebody's going out and hanging their own shingle. So people just turn to the internet. And so the internet's, as we know, great and also not great in a lot of ways. So
yeah, it's either you can get a person at $500 an hour or a legal Zoom and off you go. Is there anything in between? Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so I saw people putting themselves needlessly at risk and sought to provide the solution. So we do that at Functional Lawyer. And through that, so there's documents, weekly office hours with me, and a little bit of a curriculum that I get tired of saying the same things over and over again. So you can just watch some short videos there. And I recommend all providers have a little curriculum for their patients, because you have, a lot of times longer appointments, and, we absorb maybe 30% of what somebody says orally to us. So it's good for them to check back on. But out of Functional Lawyer, because my wife was so successful in her practice, people approached me to be a business coach, and thinking that I had something to do with it, where, she deserves all the credit for that. But we said yes. And so we both kind of mentored them. And that's turned into what is now Origins Incubator, which is a physician-led mentorship program where myself, I provide a lot of legal and then finance and marketing, which is more than we do at Functional Lawyer. And then my wife, Linda, does a lot of here's how you run the practice efficiently, get patients in the door, how you conduct the appointments. We have a third partner, Cheryl Burdett, who teaches a very comprehensive clinical curriculum centered on kind of functional medicine, integrated medicine principles there as well. And so that's a cohort-based system, lots of bells and whistles in it. And if you're looking to start a practice and you're a physician, definitely give us a shot. Let's see if it's a good fit for you at Origins Incubator. But yeah, over the years at Functional Lawyer, it's definitely been kind of a wild ride, and everybody, especially with the pandemic, threw gasoline on the fire of telemedicine. So that's been again, there's just a ton of misinformation out there on the internet, right? And people believe what they want to believe. And so I held a bunch of webinars in 2020, kind of explaining hey, it's not what you think it is. It's not a free for all, even though we're right in the smack dab of the middle of this PhD. What you want it to be is not what it is. And so we had a bunch of webinars there.
Yeah.
And that led to me writing the book you mentioned, The Practice of Telemedicine.
Yeah.
Which I've been shouting this from the rooftops for maybe 2-3 years now. And I'm not shocked, but tell your friends. People need to know all this information because they're probably doing it wrong, and they're probably going to get in criminal or civil liability. So the book is like $24 on Amazon. It's the best value you'll get.
And I'll second it. I mean, you sent me a copy before our first episode. I read through it. I called it, it's more like a handbook to those of you who are wondering about this, whether $24 is worth it or not. Buy the book, because it is worth it. And it's like, it's not theory. It's not this or that. It's go find your state. It's state by state. Here's what you need. Here's some essentials. It's certainly enough to get you started. And I was impressed by just how useful it was. It really, I mean, thinking of it as any other book that sits on your nightstand and you read before you go to bed, not the thing. It's on your desk next to you as you're working during the day, and it's certainly more than enough to get you. That was my take. It's like, this is handbook to me is a better term for it than book. Just to frame people,
Yeah, well, I do like to joke that you can put it on your nightstand and fall asleep to it, right?
Sure.
So well, if you start reading it, but I try my best in all my communications, but especially the book, to make it, plain English, accessible. I don't bother myself with a lot of grammar, even though for the first 25 years of my life, I was the biggest grammar snob you'll ever meet. But I'm trying to write it to be accessible, right?
Yeah.
And I ended sentences with prepositions. I used contractions,
just to keep it fresh and fun. Yeah, right.
So it should be an easy read, and it took me a long time to get it down to the main body's 84 pages. So I send a copy to all my clients for free, and I'm very surprised when they ask me telemedicine questions. I'm like, "Well, did you read the book?" And they're like, "No, I haven't." I'm like, "It's 84 pages.
Just not that page, right?" To kind of lie and get out of it.
Oh, so the subtitle, to your point, is A Complete Legal Guide for Licensed Healthcare Professionals. So,
but think about that. 84 pages, 50 states, right? How long can any state be? It's got to get to the point. Probably a quick and easy read, at least enough. Probably the kind of thing where you should read it more than once if it's your state, because legal stuff takes a while to sink in for non-legal people. But nevertheless, it's not a droning on and on. That was my take.
Yeah, I try to make it, short and to the point. And there's a famous quip by somebody, I forget, somebody can tell us in the comments below, but it's like, "I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one."
Yeah, right.
And so it took me a long time to get it that short. And there's appendices in the back. It's not just an 84-page book for $24.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
The state-by-state guides are in the back.
Yeah.
And so just in doing that, we set it out to dispel a lot of the myths and lay out a bunch of the definitions, which I'm going to kind of briefly recap here today, because that'll make more sense as we talk about what are the trends today. You need a little baseline if you missed the last episode or haven't got the book yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where to start? A lot of people, so I really talk mostly to functional and integrative cash-based practices. And so they think that if they're not prescribing pharmaceuticals or they're not taking insurance, that they're kind of flying under the radar and it's not actually practicing medicine. Not true. The practice of medicine is kind of diagnose, treat, cure, prevent ailment, illness, symptom, disease, real or imagined in a lot of cases, and also includes lifestyle recommendations, interventions, protocols, and supplement protocols, and all of that. So
just to bring it home, if you were my functional medicine doctor and you told me, go take a walk every day, that's going to help, you just crossed into you're now practicing medicine.
Well, that's a nuanced question, right? So
okay. If clearly, listener, this is unrehearsed. So yeah.
If I said that on a YouTube video, you'd have no problem. You'd have no expectation that I was your doctor.
Yeah.
If I said it in a one-on-one visit in my office, then for you, that would be
that's kind of what I meant.
Medical advice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, your doctor kind of leaves you with the prescription pad most of the time at your PCP and says, "Hey, eat healthy, get more exercise, and take this once a day for the next 60 days. But they don't give you any suggestions on how to do it. And so what you were talking about is, yes, obviously one part of a larger protocol. And so let's talk about what is the practice of medicine, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of rattled off a bunch of names, but when it comes to where does the line get crossed? Well, a very clear line is if you're ordering lab tests, they're your patient now, right?
Mm-hmm.
The health coaches can't do that. Other licensees can, some nutritionists can. So if you're within your scope, you can do that. But
Mm-hmm.
then you're within a licensed healthcare at that point. The other one is, it's a little bit less easy to define, but something where if you are giving individualized clinical advice to a person based on
Mm-hmm.
how they're presenting to you,
Mm-hmm.
then that's pretty much the practice of medicine.
Okay.
It's taking your knowledge, expertise, training, education, experience, and may not even realize you're doing all this, but you're eliminating options, you're ruling things out
Mm-hmm.
more than Carl and Scott could ever do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is actually the art of the practice of medicine. So basically the takeaway is individualized clinical advice to a particular person based on kind of how they're presenting to you. So
Okay.
if I said on a podcast, studies have shown that most people can benefit from vitamin C and vitamin D each day because most of us are vitamin D deficient.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
But if I have your labs in front of me and I go, wow, your vitamin D is way deficient, why don't you take 10,000 IBUs,
yeah.
whatever that's called.
Yeah.
10,000, milligrams, let's go. Let's
Mm-hmm.
say every day, twice a day, morning and night. Obviously that's the difference.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was getting at with my question. It's doctor-patient relationship focused discussion about the patient. Advice is given, specific to me. Yeah. Okay.
And I get that question all the time because people are probing and trying to get to the edges. And it's like they don't want to get in trouble. It's not like they're trying to get away with anything. But often what I like to help people do is have them visualize. If they're speaking in front of a group and somebody asks them a question at the end, like a Q&A session, imagine you were at the front of a ballroom at a conference, and then there's a Q&A session. You're still in a huge group setting, and so you don't know them, you don't know their history or anything like that. So your answer is going to be different than if they're sitting right in front of you and you do know their history. It's going to say, well, studies have shown, or at my clinic, people seem to have done better with, but check with your doctor.
Right. Yeah.
And
okay.
So those are the kinds of or if they came up to you afterwards, after you got off stage, and were like, hey, great talk. I wanted to ask you about my thyroid.
Right.
The answer would be the same. Be like, I don't really know all your situation, but typically studies suggest that thyroid is best,
yes.
fill in the blanks,
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. And I remember our talk last time. Yeah. I mean, telemedicine was having a hard time, and then the pandemic came, and just every restriction, just like in real time, like, holy cow, we need to deal with this. But it's turned into a pretty rapidly moving thing since then. So, and when we were talking to get ready for this episode, you had said there's a lot of bills, there's a lot of action going on. So it's this, global question I've got. What's new? What are you seeing? What should we be paying attention to?
Yeah, there's a few new things. And just if I can go back to history one more time.
Yeah.
There were some headlines that, one, people don't usually read past the headline.
Mm-hmm.
And two, a lot of times journalists don't always get it right if they're not in legal journalists all the time. And so even if you do read the full article, a layperson can come away from it not fully understanding what's happening. And so you do either want to go to the primary material or talk to somebody who can translate it for you. Because there was never a free-for-all with Medicare across the country. There was never a free-for-all as far as licensing goes across the country. Each state had its own executive orders. They had different, this is kind of leading into the answer to your current question.
Sure.
They had different kind of allowances or flexibilities. They all expired at different times, all of that. So there never was like you could do whatever you want right now.
Yeah.
Enforcement was never there, but the point is the rules weren't like, just do whatever you want. So today, all those executive orders have expired from the public health emergency. There is one that kind of still exists, so I'll give you that one. One flexibility has been kicked to the end of this year, and that is the in-person requirement for controlled substance prescribing.
Okay.
So when it comes to telemedicine, way back in 2009, Congress and the DEA imposed an in-person visit requirement before you can prescribe a controlled substance. That means the prescribing provider needs to see the patient in person. It can't be they go to their PCP and then they call you. That was lifted in 2020. It has been lifted now for 4, going to be going on 5 years by the time that this year's over.
Okay.
It was supposed to expire last year in around this time, April 2024.
So expiring means,
2023.
so there was a pause on you got to be in person, and now that's coming
Yes.
back, and now it's going to come back. That's whenever it happens. That's what you mean.
Correct.
Okay.
So they lifted the in-person visit requirement.
Got it.
It was going to come back into force, or that waiver was going to expire.
Got it.
When all the other PHE flexibilities expired. And that would have been April 2023.
Okay.
I won't go into too much detail because it's super boring. But the way the federal government works is DEA put out proposed rules. Industry had a chance to comment, and they had record-breaking comments, and nobody liked what DEA proposed, so DEA postponed it. They postponed it again till the end of 2024. So quick takeaway, something to write down, is you can still prescribe controlled substances without seeing a patient in person through the end of 2024.
Okay.
The rule that will come out beyond that, we still don't know. DEA is still working on it. So I can't give you any like firm, all right, then at that point you do X, Y, and Z, because we don't know what that rule will look like. Yeah. Again, nobody was impressed with their first attempt. So
I wonder what's going to change. Like, it's either you have to see the person or you don't. I'm sure there's options in between, but I don't know. You kind of wonder, like, what's, I don't know.
There's an option written into the 2008 Act that was passed, and DEA has never acted on it, meaning there's supposed to be an exception for valid telemedicine clinics. And so the whole point of this act was to stop like websites from selling opioids to anybody who had a credit card. And so, right. And there was
okay.
Act. And so it was an opioid crisis, and they kind of overreached a little bit, but they did put a carve out in there. And Congress told DEA, executive branch agency, to implement a carve out for telemedicine clinics that were like valid and, operating in good faith.
Yeah.
But they've never acted, and now it's 15 years later. So ideally, we're all crossing our fingers they will come out with that kind of carve out. But
so no opioids at 1 a.m. with a credit card, but hey, if you're a legit practice and you can show it, you can, that would make sense.
Establishing a valid physician provider or patient relationship, or provider patient relationship, let's say prescriber patient in this case. Okay. And there should be a carve out for that, but we don't know yet. That was still up in the air. A lot of other bills. To your point, somebody back in September, some policy wonk, and I get all these emails, some attorney that follows all of this and is involved in national policy and state level policy, called 2024 the Super Bowl of telehealth regulation. Meaning there's going to be a lot of action in the state legislatures and the federal government, hopefully, to bring a lot of clarity to telemedicine rules. They
picked an election year to call it the Super Bowl. I didn't think about that's even bolder. You're asking a slow moving thing to move fast, and you're asking it to do it in the mother of all distractions year. So, okay.
And
interesting. Nobody could have predicted how sort of I'll say the productivity of Congress these days, but back then, but okay.
He might have been holding his fingers for the state levels, because the state level is still a patchwork all over the place kind of set of laws. And even into the pandemic, some states had no telemedicine regulations written down whatsoever. Pennsylvania comes to mind for that one. But in the years since, a lot of stuff's happened. Some states are loosening and lowering the barriers to telemedicine, but at the same time, others are adding more regulation to their oversight. And before you take a cynical view, they have to balance patient safety with flexibility and access to
freedom
care
to operate.
So there is a valid use for medical boards, besides just collecting your fees and dues and going out to fancy dinners. That's the kind of the image we get.
And that makes me want to ask a follow-up, because we talked about this last time, I just don't remember. So you are a functional medicine practitioner X, and you're in a state whose regulations are not to your liking. Because you're telemedicine, can you try to practice in a different state where you like them better? Or the answer is not yes or yes only, but I don't remember the rest of it. You know what I mean? Like, can you go to sort of shop states, live in one state, but practice in a better state for you? Is that allowed?
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh, I was wrong. The answer is yes.
You'll want to check because I
Mhm.
believe it's New Jersey, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah.
New Jersey has a couple of extra restrictions where if you're licensed in New Jersey, there is something, and I don't remember the exact rule right now. They
Mhm.
want you to be in New Jersey.
Okay.
So if you're in New Jersey and you're I forget what it is, but so some of them have a where the provider is sitting, but for 99.9% of the other time, it's telemedicine occurs, and this is chapter 2. Telemedicine occurs where the patient is located. So
That's
I
what it
live in,
was.
yep.
So you have to pay attention to a bunch of states depending on your practice.
So New York, New Jersey have pretty restrictive kind of rules around a lot of like alternative tests, and they're not huge. I mean, there are very successful practices in those states, but they have different regulations around it. So if you lived in New York and you're like, man, this is too many regulations, well, you can get a license or a special purpose telemedicine only license, which we talked about last time, in Florida or Ohio or Texas or wherever, and then build a whole practice in one of those states, particularly if you snowbird. So, yes, you can absolutely
Okay.
go, but you can't just like say, open your doors and say, all right, I serve anyone around the country because they called me and they want to give me money. Like, no, you can't do that. But yeah, you can practice in multiple states and
Okay.
you can even go to Costa Rica for the summer and then practice here, virtually as well.
Okay.
So a lot of people actually do that. So I
Yeah.
like Costa Rica.
Interesting. All right. So I'll bring us back to, I took us off the path of what's new. So I want to bring us back. So the global, what's new, Scott? What are you seeing?
Yeah. Just to wrap up that one though, there
Yeah.
are, in the book I go over it, but you can definitely find this information on the internet. Make sure you're getting, primary sources.
Yeah.
But there are 16 or 17 states now, which is leading to the answer to the next question, that offer special telemedicine only licenses. They're faster to get. They only require that you validate your license and credentials from your home state. And then they allow you to practice telemedicine to varying degrees of scope in other states.
Okay.
16 or 17. Florida and West Virginia are the two loosest or freest licenses. And then it goes down from there. Texas and Maine are the two most restrictive.
Okay.
The other option for multiple state licenses is looking at interstate compacts, licensure compacts. The one for MDs and DOs is the IMLCC, Interstate Medical Licensure Compact Commission is the extra C. And their website is .org, imlcc.org. Other licensees have compacts, but they're just not as widely adopted. So the nurse practitioner compact went from 1 state of adoption to 3, so a 300% increase.
Yeah, right.
in the last year, but still very, very low.
Yeah.
And that brings me to another point for licensees that are not MDs and DOs. The state regulation for you in particular changes wildly between states. So you got to look at scope of practice. Are NPs autonomous? If you're a naturopath, are you even recognized in that state? Somebody, to tell you what's new, somebody in my state of Florida, a naturopath, got arrested and is facing 4 felony counts of practicing medicine without a license. So the enforcement, while not well publicized, does happen. And so just kind of making sure you are checking the state laws, particularly if you're not an MD or DO. What's new? So more states hopefully are adopting. So what's not going to happen is there'll be a national telemedicine license.
Okay.
Maybe at the end of our lifetime. But what's more likely is more and more states will do that special purpose telemedicine license or join the compact or both. So that's more likely to happen. So the barriers are coming down. They're making it easier. However, you still have to play by the rules.
Yeah.
One new thing that we talked about, that I have talked about you, let's start that one over. One new thing that we talked about earlier was there's a lawsuit out of New Jersey, and I put this on the blog. So there's actually the 2 providers are that are the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. One's in Massachusetts, one's in Pennsylvania. They both see patients who live in New Jersey. One's a cancer specialist in Boston at Mass General. Another one is I think a cranial surgery specialist out of Pittsburgh, or at least Western Pennsylvania. And so they're suing the state of New Jersey, claiming that their requirement that out-of-state providers be licensed in New Jersey to see New Jersey patients is unconstitutional for a variety of reasons. I'm happy to go into all the reasons if you want.
I'm curious, like just like the couple of like the big ones, like because my first thought was, are they onto something? Who knows?
No. Short answer, no.
Okay. I'm for everything on what I think the answer is on these questions.
If they were successful, that would be great news for providers. But then the next logical step, or the slippery slope argument, would invalidate all licensure rules of every profession across the entire country and throw us all into chaos. I'll explain what I mean in a second. So their first argument is that it violates the dormant commerce clause. And to know what that means, you just have to know that, going back to your 5th grade civics class or 12th grade civics class, whenever you got it, whatever is not specifically enumerated in the Constitution is left to the states to control.
Okay.
But one of the things that is specifically enumerated for Congress to control is interstate commerce.
Yep.
Often that takes, the Federal Aviation Administration is kind of the biggest example. Congress controls that. But there's a kind of a sub doctrine of the Commerce Clause called the Dormant Commerce Clause, where even if Congress hasn't passed a law regulating interstate commerce, if a state law significantly burdens interstate commerce, it also can be invalidated due to this clause. And so that's what they're trying to argue here. It won't be successful.
Okay.
Because in order to be successful under that, you have to unduly burden out of state, whoever it is, out of that state. Basically, the state is discriminating against out of state people to protect their in-state people. And
hard to argue.
People who want to see any patients in New Jersey all have to be licensed, so it's not discriminating against in-state versus out-of-state. And then more significantly, a similar case under that same doctrine came up in California last year. These 9 individuals on the Supreme Court, ruled in favor of the state law and not the Dormant Commerce Clause. So that one's called National Pork, if you're a nerd like me and want to go look it up. But in that one, California said any pigs or pork products sold in California, need to come from pigs that have at least, I think, 24 square feet of pen space a piece.
Okay.
And so the pork industry was like, this is going to cost us millions and millions of dollars to retrofit all of our pork, and California is like one of the biggest economies in our country. And even so, the court said, nope, because California pork producers have to comply with the same rule. So it's not undue burden on you. And so in this case, I think the very quick, this is a stupid argument, not stupid, but this is a not very strong argument, is, oh, you're unduly burdened. Well, grab a telemedicine license from New Jersey. It's $500,
there it is. Yeah.
So it's not that hard to do.
They're paying way more for that in lawyers, aren't they?
Right.
You think about it, like you could solve this thing this afternoon. Yeah.
I mean, if you just read the complaint, which I've linked to in an old blog post, if you just read it, and they've written it like a nice story where it's really burdensome on the doctors, it's really burdensome on the patients, both of whom are very sympathetic plaintiffs, as we call them, like childhood cancer, and their follow-up visits they have to travel all the way to Massachusetts from New Jersey once a year for follow-ups, instead of Dr. McDonald just getting a telemedicine license in New Jersey. So that one's not likely to succeed.
Okay.
There's a few others. Another really confusing argument was the First Amendment. They're discriminating against the content of the speech because necessarily they're only worried about medical speech. And I
don't even get that one. Yeah, I don't even understand.
Yeah, I didn't describe it well, but it's going to fail because otherwise you couldn't regulate any speech at all.
Yeah.
Because any attorney or accountant or whatever would be like, I don't need a license. This is my First Amendment right to speak about laws or speak about accounting. And so that one's going to fail. Otherwise, if it was successful, there would be no licenses again. That's what I was alluding to earlier. And then the other two are a little bit more nebulous, like privileges and immunities, where parents have the right to direct the care of their children's medical services. That one I haven't really seen any good arguments on that one yet either. Right now, to give you guys an update, they're in the motion to dismiss phase. So the plaintiffs did theirs, the defendants, this is the
Yeah.
state of New Jersey,
Yeah.
has yet to respond to their motion to dismiss.
Yeah.
But they outlined all of their defenses and arguments.
Yeah. So I have a very roundabout way of making the occasional plug that I do, which is as healthcare specialists and healthcare practitioners, our listeners, whenever you need professional advice, please find those who specialize in your domain. Because in this particular case, I don't know what I'd like to think more. Like they're aware of the go get a license in New Jersey and call it a day, and they just rejected it, which just makes them, I don't know what, or they weren't aware of it, which means that they chose legal counsel who didn't think to say to them, there's a way around this. Just go get the license and you can go do whatever you can treat the way you want to treat. And so specialists know this, right? So whether if you're looking for an accountant, not a general, an attorney, not a general, as private practice owners in specialty areas, there's stuff that matters that the generalists just might know, but might not know. And so we don't know what's going on with the attorneys in this particular case, but $500 in an application and you could have what you want just seems like a better outcome than what they're trying to do. And so, you know what I mean? Like I'm sort of fitting it in here, and I don't say this every episode, but please find those who are deeply experienced in what you do in the type of practice you are in, because, it just sounds like a much simpler solution than what Scott is, summarizing for us here.
Well, this case in particular, it's brought by like a nonprofit legal foundation whose mission is to get cases in front of the Supreme Court. So
who's being served? I know that, but there's, the kid with cancer is not being well served right now, right? Because everything's being slowed down in court. I mean,
yeah, and this particular foundation takes the extreme like civil liberties and
fair enough,
personal liberties to the extreme. So
yeah,
I don't
all that judgment aside. It's just, wouldn't you know, if I were the parent of this child and somebody said to me, in an afternoon and $500 of an application, you could actually get what you want with these providers, I'd be like, why are we doing all this?
The patient doesn't even have to pay it. The doctor.
No, I get it. Yes, but whoever has to pay it, it's like this is for a doctor. This is for a cancer specialist. It's likely anyway.
And rounding error. One more thing in that case, which was kind of confusing to me, was that in their initial filing, the complaint, the plaintiffs admitted they had been practicing telemedicine in New Jersey without licenses. And so it's like, they're just kind of admitting it would be silly if the state went after them for that. But
it just adds to why don't you just get the license? Anyway, okay. So what else is going on in telemedicine? So we've got this case going on in New Jersey. What else are you seeing?
It's a high profile. I got a lot of press, or at least I got a lot of pings in my alert systems from it. Yeah. I don't think it'll go anywhere because it would just invalidate everything. So and the court has ruled on similar case to the contrary. One big thing is that there's also a lot of press around Medicare is expanding access to telehealth. There's a bill in Congress right now, federal Congress right now, where they are trying to add audio only calls to covered Medicare services.
So what is the current level of access through Medicare?
Medicare's rules are highly restrictive in order to cover telemedicine. So they're trying to lower that barrier.
Okay.
Usually the patient has to be at a facility, not at home. The provider who's remote also has to be at a facility. And
you mean, when you say facility, you mean like a senior living community, or
like a clinic or a hospital, or sometimes a senior living facility, nursing home, if you will. But
if I'm already at the hospital, why do I need a telemedicine appointment?
Right. But and then also part of that restriction is there's no specialist within 75 miles that could see them in person. And so Medicare's rules were very antiquated.
Yeah.
Even in 2020. And so they're trying to fix that a little bit. So, but that's a bill in Congress. And as we were, talking, I don't know if it was on the recording or not.
No.
But, it is Congress, and they don't always pass the bills they introduce. And it is an election year. So we'll see if that gets anywhere. It seems like that's a bipartisan issue, expanding access to care. But, normally they tie it into something that is partisan and it gets killed. So, so that's tough, but be on the lookout for that. Be on the lookout for the DEA rule to come out early next year.
Okay.
But the big takeaway is it's not all a free for all. Still, it never has been. And
Yeah.
and there are barriers coming down, but there are still rules in place, and some barriers are going up in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, or the restrictions that you have to follow are going up. So those are kind of the big takeaways here. Is still not a free for all. You can, and what I would usually tell people, and I hate to preach, but often you can fill up your practice just in your own state, or just your state plus one more, like yours plus one, and you only have 250 working days a year if you take no days off. So
it's true.
so I don't know how many people you could see. Somebody do the math for me. But in functional medicine, my core clientele, 5 to 8 is a lot of people per day. And so 1250.
Yeah, these are not the 7-minute annual physicals with the traditional primary care. These are, I mean, the nature of fun, like you go in depth. That's why you're doing this. You didn't like the other way. So yeah, it takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's safe ways to do it that don't put yourself at risk and still allow you to, if you choose, practice in all 50 states.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, there's a bunch of doctors out there, a bunch of providers that do have 50 licenses or more, including DC, Puerto Rico, Guam. And they're manageable. Like it's some paperwork and a couple $100. It's not like you have to go back to school and get a 4-year degree or anything like that, right?
Right.
So it is manageable.
And is there renewals? Like if I had 5 states, like, do licenses need to be kept up, renewed, CE'd, that kind of thing? Like what's the carrying cost of a license?
Yeah, great question. So the special telemedicine license is preferred for that reason. So the one in Florida doesn't cost you $1. It's free. You may have to pay your board to send over your records. And you do need a registered agent in Florida, which is just a designated person to accept formal notices on your behalf. And that can be as low as $35 a year. But there's no renewals for that one. And I know Florida the best. It's the one that other states are trying to model right now. When they introduce it here in their legislative sessions. Full licenses, even those get obtained through the compact, do have different rules on renewal and like state-specific CMEs. So it does carry an administrative burden in that sense. And that's why, like, I recommend, if you're trying to expand, one, look at the telemedicine only licenses, see which ones might make sense for you. 2, be judicious in the states you want to add, unless your goal is to have 50 state licenses, which some people do. As I said, you can carry 3 or 4, and that's not unwieldy for most people to kind of keep on track of. Like, set up a document in your set up calendar reminders for those 3 or 4. I mean, we do it all the time. We have homeowners insurance and HOA dues and life insurance policies. Like,
there's the cost of doing business. There's just cost of doing business. It's not a negative thing. It's just be eyes wide open about it.
Yeah. And so, yes, there is a little bit of a burden, and that's one of the drawbacks. That's kind of why I highlight, like, you could probably fill up with one state, probably. But definitely 2.
Yeah. And just a piece of marketing advice: if you're thinking of expanding, you better be solid and well respected in your local area first, because that's the credibility, all the learnings you're going to have that are going to carry you forward. And somebody who doesn't know you, now you got to go find those people in the next state over. And one of the best ways that they're going to stick around and check you out, if you do find them, is if you're successful where you are at home. If you're not, they might still call you, but it's going to be harder because why would they trust you? Because you don't have, because you have a great track record at home first, so expansion's always fun to think about. Just be smart, be smart.
And it's hard when you're just starting out to say no to somebody who wants to give you money, but it does carry criminal and civil liabilities. And most importantly too, your malpractice may not cover you in a state in which
then there's that.
So you're naked too on top of it.
Yeah. Before we kind of wrap this up, anything else that's new, that's interesting to you, that's, kind of being talked about or discussed in the world of telemedicine?
Yeah, it's all exciting to me. I mean,
I know.
Because I'm just a nerd. But I mean, wearables and AI are kind of the new frontier of legal, because legal is reactionary by nature. And so we're just trying to catch up to AI stuff and how that all works. That's exciting. I mean, and then I'll be following it. And just a quick plug, I started a podcast this year called The Junto with Scott Rattigan. So we have experts from all different fields. We bring in attorneys, accountants, marketers, life coaches, people talking about imposter syndrome, all the stuff that employees, entrepreneurs can all benefit from as well. So
what's it called again? Because it was a little.
The Junto with
Can you
Scott
spell it?
Rattigan. Junto.
The Junto. Okay.
It's based on Ben Franklin's club of the same name way back in 1727, where he gathered experts from different fields and they all chatted about mutual improvement and how we can help each other, ourselves, and society. So
you're not a nerd at all. Okay. It's a great name when the explanation. I don't see nerd at all.
I like
You've self-said it like 9 times in this episode, but now we can confirm
I'm like a legal nerd. I have a mug that says I'm silently correcting your grammar. That was a gift given to me because I did it so much. So yeah, you could call me a nerd.
Wear it loud and proud. Cool. All right, there's 2 wrap-up questions I ask every guest. The first is, we've had much more of a free-form session episode than typical, but is there anything I should have asked you, but I just didn't think to ask you?
I think we covered a lot of it. That's a lot of the new stuff. And, there is a lot of pending legislation out there at all 50 states, but I don't want to get anybody's hopes up by naming specific bills because they're still wrapping up their sessions and could still be vetoed. But so just keep an eye on it. And if you're too busy to keep an eye on it, follow me at Functional Lawyer and I'll let you know about the goings and comings of it, the significant ones. That's probably the only thing I would have added.
Well, and it's a nice lead into it's a nice lead into the other question, which is, we've caught somebody's attention. They want to get going on functional medicine or on telehealth. Where can they start? Because they don't know where to start. And I was going to say, in any business or any type of practice or whatever, what the law is doing matters to you, but it just feels like more so in the telemedicine world because it's newer, because COVID threw it for a positive loop and people are trying to figure it out. So you really got to keep your finger on the pulse of this, maybe more so than if you were a restaurant or I don't know what. And so I'd say follow Scott, follow him because you could try to keep up with this if all you want to, but it's easier if you follow somebody who's already doing it, who can translate it. So keep your finger on the, if your state changes a law tomorrow, that's on you, whether you can keep up with it or not. So I would say follow him to just have an easy way to keep your finger on the pulse of what's changing in your world. So I'll start with, I would say, do that. Is there anything else you would say?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, medicine is up there with financial regulation, like the stock market, as far as
it's a good point.
Most regulated industries there are. So you definitely want to kind of figure that out before it's too late. And if you're trying to get started, tons of free resources at Functional Lawyer. It's not just law, nerdy stuff. There's a free checklist, 23-point checklist to starting a practice. We talk about non-legal stuff all the time. The Junto podcast is kind of hosted on that website, Functional Lawyer. So that's the best place to.
You already have a great newsletter. I mean, there's ways to. Free you're content. Pumping out, I mean, regular good stuff. So yeah.
So even if you never spend a dime, it's probably worth a follow, just for some tips and tricks. Again,
if you have another attorney, make them follow it. It's just like.
Oh, and I did want to point out, to your point, where a lot of times with telemedicine, I see a lot of like course creators and marketers like start your profitable practice and start your online practice today and make $100,000 in 30 days. Be careful because they often don't know what they're talking about. I have clients that come to me and they say, this business coach told me I could do this. And well, they're wrong. You can't do that,
Until you're caught, it's great.
Yeah. And it's not like I know everything and I don't. And that's why I started the podcast, to bring in experts from other fields. But just be careful who you're getting your information from. I mean, I feel like you guys are all professionals, went to a professional school. And so the difference between a primary source and a secondary source and a tertiary, quaternary source. On Facebook, your cousin's uncle who once talked to a lawyer about getting out of jail once, can't be giving you advice, right?
Yeah.
So just pay attention to where you're getting your information from.
If you
have questions, you can reach out to me just follow me. You could submit questions via email. I'll put them in the next content potentially if I can't answer you
Mm-hmm.
directly.
Mm-hmm.
And so just be careful where you're getting your info.
It's a good
And there's
point.
tons
Like,
of resources out there, but
yeah.
know who's giving you that resource.
And it's a good point because you, as a specialist, you're a practitioner, not you, Scott, but you, the listener. You probably bristle when somebody says, I don't know, I'll make it up. My trainer said blah, and you say, well, in your mind, you're saying your trainer's an idiot. Your trainer wasn't trained like I am. Why would you ever listen? Well, right back at you. Have a look in the mirror, and if some random says something, so I said what I said earlier, like pick somebody who's got some deep experience, current clients, and is keeping up with your field. They're the ones, there's just too much nuance. There's too much specificity. It's not a generalist. And this is your career and license, in play. So choose carefully, even if it means it takes you longer to find a good one. It'll be worth it in the end. The pain of waiting is much less than the pain of a bad mistake. So point well received.
Put that on a throw pillow.
Yeah, I'll have to listen to the recording. I already forgot exactly what I said, but good. Scott, this is great. Thank you for coming on again. It's an easy conversation, and I know I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did too. So thank you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah. And so the contact information that you provided will go into the show notes for this episode, which I think is probably largely the same as the last episode. So anyone who wants to find you, they've got another place to go look. Couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you are someone like Scott or I and you seek to serve private practice owners, or if you're a private practice owner yourself and you've got some experience on the business side of private practice that you think others in private practice would benefit from, please, we want you to come on PracticeCare and tell the world about it. In the show notes for Scott's episode, and every episode, there's a link, a couple of clicks. It's super easy. Just tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, subscribe to PracticeCare. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, every player and platform. PracticeCare, one word. We do a new episode every week, and that's the easiest way to stay up to date with new episodes as they drop. So subscribe so you can stay up to date.
And give them a 5-star rating. Throw some words in there too in the review.
Yes, please do that.
Helps your friends find him.
Yes.
Do that for Carl. And any content creator that you like, give them a subscribe. All of them. They're all just working really, really hard. Yeah. Particularly Carl. He's not asking for anything through this podcast. So give him a subscribe, 5-star it, or 4.5-star if you choose.
You can break into Apple's algorithm and throw a half in there. I will take it. But thank you for that. They
don't give you halves.
They don't. 3.75, not allowed. So yes, thank you. Please do that. And until next time.